Hi guys, welcome to our latest episode of Toys and Mass Destruction. Today I'm joined by Dave,
Hi, hi.
and I'm also joined by Joe.
Glad to be back. Haven't been on for a couple of episodes, so it's good. It's
Yeah,
good to not just be sitting behind the scenes again.
yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah.
Join us for a
yeah,
chat.
Yep.
yeah. We had some very exciting news this week. Games Workshop dropped the latest balance data slate, the last one of Ninth Edition. Whole host of changes. And what we want to talk about this episode is not so much the changes themselves, but how they're going to have an impact on the game as a whole. So we're going to go through all the factions, talk about what's changed for them, how we think they're probably going to perform in this new meta until 10th edition drops. But yeah, so before we get into talking about everything that's going to be changing, we just want to talk about, we have a Hertfordshire Spring GT coming up very, very soon. List submission is on Saturday the 15th, so it's pretty much imminent, but it's still not too late to get tickets. We're going to be putting the event down in the description. Check it out, guys, if you're interested. It's going to be one of the first GTs in the UK to use the new balance data slate, so it's a great opportunity to test it out and try out the new rules.
Oh,
Yeah,
pretty
come on down.
excited to stand around and watch people play 5 games and see how all the new rules change. See some weird factions that I wasn't expecting to suddenly have like a 60% win rate, because that's normally how it works.
Yeah, because that's how it works, exactly.
But yeah, so we want to go on to talking about factions, Liam. Shall we start with Imperium?
Yeah, we'll start with Imperium. We'll work our way down. So first thing up that we can talk about is Sisters. So Adepta Sororitas. Yeah, I'm fairly certain off the top of my head these guys didn't get any changes.
Change. It's just the only thing on there is a holdover from an old one. I think they're probably one of those factions by the fact that they didn't get any changes is in and of itself a good change. They already, like, in the hands of someone who knew what they were doing, they're already a pretty good faction. So I think a lot of their hard matchups, so things like Dark Angel Terminator blobs that are no longer all transhuman, when you were firing a million melter guns into them that were suddenly doing nothing, that was a bit of a feels bad. But I would say that was probably one of their hardest matchups that now probably goes a lot easier when you can actually kill those Terminators pretty reliably.
Yeah, agreed. They're going to go into those top, matches a bit easier, but overall, probably sitting about the same place. Do you think?
Yeah, I'd say that their win rate might go up a couple of percent, which isn't the worst thing because they were just looking at they were at a 45% win rate, which is supposedly within GW's Goldilocks zone. I could see that going up a couple of percent when they're losing some of their hardest matchups, but we will have to wait and see, I guess.
Well, we might see them winning. If they're getting to those end matchups and those end matchups are now easier, it could push them. Make those finals matches and semi-finals matches that much easier for them. So, see what happens.
I think I agree. So then next up, we've got Adeptus Custodes. Custodes have had, throughout Ninth, a massive up and down hit and swing. They've been amazing, then they've been bad, then they've been amazing again, then suddenly they've been nerfed. And weirdly, they never really had their time to shine because they got nerfed pretty much as soon as the book came out, right, Liam? I seem to remember.
Yeah, so when they first came out, like you said, they dropped roughly the same time as Genestealer Cult, and they were kind of like the boogeymen. But then they had some stuff changed, like, I want to say they lost a lot of buffs that they could give to the bikes, some stratagems.
Yeah, I can't remember what tournament it was, but it was off the back of one big tournament, wasn't it? Where, like, they just dominated, and then Games Workshop went, knee jerk, nerf.
Yeah. And they also lost OBSEC on pretty much everything that wasn't troops.
Yeah, that was a huge one.
Yeah, since then they got their OBSEC back on all of their infantry guys. That was not this balance data slate, one of the updates beforehand. But they did get another minor, well, it's pretty big, but they got one small change. Yeah, they got one small change in this balance data slate, which is there are 2 separate stratagems for Custodes. I forget the names of them. Like, one is Arcane Genetic Alchemy, something like that.
Arcane Genetic Alchemy and the Emperor's Auspice, I think it is.
Yes. So each of these stratagems, one of them gives a unit transhuman, any infantry unit, I believe. So can't be wounded on a 1, 2, or 3. And the other stratagem, again, I believe it's any infantry unit, and it means you cannot reroll hits, wounds, or damage rolls when you target that unit. What a lot of people doing beforehand was using both of these stratagems on a unit at the same time to make like their big blobs of wardens just totally unkillable. And now you cannot use both stratagems on the same unit in the same phase.
Yeah, and because obviously you then used to normally combat with the banner, so you'd be -1 to hit, and suddenly you get that miracle profile of you're hitting me on a 4, you wounded me on a 4, and then I get a 4-up save, and then suddenly it doesn't really matter what dice you throw at them, it just doesn't kill them. And I feel like that's definitely kind of what they wanted to get away from with Custodes was, here's my massive block of unkillable wardens that just wanders up the board and kills anything it looks at. How well that will shake out for them, I don't know. I feel like the Codex, weirdly for a Codex that doesn't have that many units, still has quite a lot of depth, because those units you can run in quite a lot of ways, like depending on whether you run Shadow Keepers or you run, what's the main one? The Mortal Wound one? Emperor's Chosen. There's a couple of different ways to run them.
Didn't someone win an RT or a GT the other day? Just bike. A full bike going.
Yeah, just 20 bikes. Someone run an RTT with just 20 bikes.
Hero.
It's just a bit of a meme.
Yeah.
Shadow Keepers as well, which I didn't expect.
No, I think Custodes are still in a pretty good win rate. And I mean, they were at, 51% going into this balanced data slate. I could see that dropping down to like 50, 49 maybe. But even then, again, Deathwing were a big problem for them. They would hit the top tables, run into Deathwing, and they just can't kill anything.
Yeah.
And now that they suddenly can, and also, I don't know, nerfs to Marines as well. I mean, they're probably quite good into Marines, but it's mainly the nerf to Deathwing probably helps them quite a lot.
Which again is that, if you're coming to those last semi-finals, finals matchups, which they're likely to get to anyway, because they're a solid codex.
Yeah,
solid
I think
army.
Custodes were spending a lot of time
going, with the advantage into those matches again.
Yeah, a lot of time like on the mid tables, they get up to the top tables, and then they can't compete with like Deathwing, and they get knocked back down again. But I think with some of those top table matchups getting nerfed, I think they could suddenly be in the top tables.
It's going to be interesting to see which way it falls. It's a slight nerf one side, a slight buff to against some of the harder matchups, and let's see.
So moving on, our next one is Mechanicus. Now, as we all know, AdMech throughout 9th have had a bit of a whirlwind. They were incredibly good when they first came out, and then over time they got worse and worse and worse, and then they were really bad, and then they got most of their nerfs reverted.
Which probably still wasn't enough, even at that point anyway.
Yeah, so obviously me and James we did an episode a couple of weeks ago on AdMech and Deathwatch. And AdMech just don't seem that bad to me. I don't understand why they're so bad. I don't understand it.
I'm the same.
I played against them last week. I was running Angro on World Eaters, and I got paired up against someone who's using pretty standard AdMech list, loads of Skitarii, one big blob of Iron Striders with the last cannons. AdMech, they dish out so much damage, and and honestly, I'm surprised they have as low a win rate as they do.
Because their secondaries are pretty good as well. And I don't know if it's a case of they have bad matchups. Like, I know when Armor of Contempt was a thing, that was their main weakness because most of their guns are -1. But then Armor of Contempt left, and I thought suddenly they were going to be busted again, and then they just weren't.
I think one factor might be that, I don't play them, but that when I have played against them, they seem a very complicated army to play. With a lot of overlapping buffs and things like that going on. They're putting bits of paper and cards all over the place. And I think it looks like there's something in there. You can feel there's something in there. I think maybe getting it out is a little bit trickier than with some of the other factions. If you get your buff wrong, you misposition things, maybe it's gonna, I think they just make it that much harder.
They just have an incredibly high skill ceiling, but also an incredibly high skill floor. If you're bad with them, you put the wrong buffs in the wrong place, and then you can just lose a 20-man unit of Skitarii, and you can't really afford to just be losing units. So maybe that's the issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I could also.
And it could just be that stuff. Sorry, Lemons is just throwing the win rate off slightly.
They do as well have the bad matchups where, like, the best example I can think of is Demons, because that game really highlighted to me just how important AdMech characters are. And if you have an army that can snipe those characters, like Demons can do it with Lords of Change and the Bolt of Change, and they also have spells that do mortal wounds and a big AoE. If they do reach those characters, the army falls apart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm still surprised they have such a low win rate. You never know; it might rise up in the last season of 9th edition.
It's sitting at 43%, which seems ridiculously low. But hopefully it goes up a couple of percent, and then they get back into the Goldilocks zone. But
yeah, I can't see. I just can't see that they're going to change that much between now and the end of 9th. I mean,
no,
not really.
So we move on to the next faction. The next faction on my list is Astra Militarum. Now, as we all know, I think they're down at the bottom of this list. Yep, Astra Militarum. One of the last codexes. One of the last codexes to come out. So I think it just about narrowly missed the last balanced data slate. And I know we amongst ourselves all kind of thought, right, that's it, Astra Militarum, they're just going to dominate every game they play. And they kind of didn't. They ended up with a 51% win rate, despite having an incredibly strong codex with some incredible jank. Mainly the one everyone knows about, Kassakin, that just look at 3 units and go, cool, all of you get 6 mortal wounds. And they do that every turn with like no real counterplay.
And it was just vile.
It was disgusting.
It was the worst. Yeah, and then you had the mortar team sitting around the finial going, yeah, I'm just gonna ignore all the modifiers and ignore everything, and then I'm not going to do a ridiculous amount of damage, but I'm dirt cheap and I'm just going to chip you away, and it means you have to come to me, and then I get to just shoot you off the board.
And that's on top of a solid codex. What was already just a generally solid codex, good infantry, good vehicles, nice transports, all the tools are there anyway and then they put those on top. It's just, I think that was going to get nerfed.
Astra Militarum are definitely a case of what you were saying, Dave, about you've got your players who, your meta chasers who pivot to Astra Militarum because they're amazing. But then Astra Militarum is definitely one of those codexes that has like a die-hard core of people who are like, no, I don't care about this broken jank. I'm going to run my 15 Sentinel list. I'm going to run my 100 Rough Rider list, whatever. And I think that probably is the main reason why they're not looking at like a 55-56% win rate, because you're going to have a very wide range of Astra Militarum players. You're going to have your guys with their 2 Baneblades on like the bottom third of tables having a great time, but then you are going to have like 18 Kassakin guy on the top list.
Another important factor is if you tried to buy any Kassakin. Unless you're prepared to pay 2 or 3 times the price on eBay, it's not happening. So
it didn't stop people from still running the 30 Kassakin list with models that and models that were definitely
Kassakin,
not converted Kassakin. People still found a way to run those Kassakin.
Yeah, of course
they were disgusting.
But so I think that the 2 changes, obviously just to run over, the 2 changes they actually did do with the overcharged las cells, which is the mortal wounds from Kassakin, is now they can only do 6 mortal wounds. It's not 6 per target. So I think still the stratagem still incredibly good. Kassakin still incredibly good, but they're no longer just like the best combo in the game.
I still think it shouldn't have been nerfed this way. It's a step in the right direction. Don't get me wrong; it's what the game needs. But I still feel they should have made it so the auto wounds from Born Soldiers should not have counted as a 6 to wound.
I could see that.
I find either way works, and I find that is.
I think if you're gonna do that for like Votann, you need to do it for everyone. Like having it be inconsistent across a couple of different codexes is where it starts to become a bit of a feels bad. And then finally, the other thing they changed is, as we said, the finial, which is the relic banner, used to be a 6-inch aura of basically ignore all modifiers like hit, wound, damage modifiers, even ignores things like phase caps, so like Abaddon's 3 wounds per phase. And it still does the vast majority of those. It just no longer ignores hit rolls. Is that right? Pretty sure it's hit rolls. Yeah. Which is massive for Guard, obviously, because they're an army that hit on 4s. If they're firing out of line of sight, cool, they now hit on 5s. If they're firing through some dents or someone pops a smoke screen, cool, they're hitting on 6s. It just it's, I think, a very good way of balancing that relic, because hitting things has always been Guard's weak point, and it means you still have the reliability that relic gives you, so it's still worth taking, but there is some defense against it. It's not just, I'm going to ignore every rule in your army and kill you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was put there for that purpose. I always felt it was put there for the purpose of maybe the phase, giving you a way of ignoring phase caps and giving you, those slightly difficult. Really, that's the main one. Just it gave you a way to get around those janky wound rolls, but giving it the hit bonus, it wasn't there for that. That wasn't supposed to be its job, I don't think.
It wasn't meant to sit there and buff 9 mortars hiding behind a wall.
No.
And let's be real. Like, as someone who played Tyranids for a long time and used Hive Guard for pretty much all of 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th edition. Nobody enjoys playing against indirect fire.
It's the worst.
Nobody likes being shot at by mortars and be like, oh, this is such a great and fun interactive game. Nobody says that.
Yeah. I think Astra Militarum still in a very good place. I think they're still going to remain around 50% because you've still got the people who are going to be top of the meta and you still have the people who are just running around with their 2 Bane Blades. Which I think is fine. I think it shows you the Astra Militarum Codex is great. You can run a million different lists. Most units in the book are good.
Solid codex.
Yeah. So if we then go on to the next one, Grey Knights, which I don't actually know if they're in the balance days. I know they've had changes. But...
So they didn't get a change themselves. No. Like there's nothing that actually changed about them. But one core. There was a change that did definitely affect them, as well as Thousand Suns. So in this case, it was the secondary Abhor the Witch is now no longer in the Warpcraft secondary. It's now in the Purge the Enemy category.
Which is massive, because it means you can't take it alongside Assassinate. So as the Grey Knight player on the team, I pretty regularly run like 4 characters. And don't get me wrong, Grey Knight characters tend to be in Terminator armor. They tend to have a lot of wounds. They tend to be like pretty tanky. So they're not easy to kill, but there are still 4 of them. So taking Assassinate is suddenly a worthwhile thing. And if you could go, right, I'm going to take Assassinate and I'm going to take Abhor the Witch. Every time you kill one of my characters, you score 6 points. So it's like, what?
Yeah.
It's 25 points if you kill all of them. That's a quarter of your maximum points if you kill all the characters.
For killing 4 characters. It's just nuts. And like Abhor the Witch is already an incredibly easy secondary. And it's not even just for the whole Assassinate thing. There's a lot of armies that have a really good secondary in that category. And it just, I've always said as the Grey Knight player, Abhor the Witch shouldn't be a thing. It just shouldn't exist, in the same way that I probably don't think you should be able to bring it down against Imperial Knights. It's just feels bad for the player who gets punished for running their army the only way they can.
Yeah.
So it just further shuts down that secondary. And I think that's never a bad thing for me.
No, I agree. I definitely agree.
It also... Net buff wise, again, I know we keep going back to Deathwing, but they were like the boogeymen. Deathwing were an incredible problem for Grey Knights because they could sit there and be transhuman, whereas Grey Knight's entire thing is going, here are my strength 5 guns with +1 a wound. So I've now gone from wounding Deathwing on a 4 to wounding Deathwing on a 2 if you're playing as Sword Brethren, which is massive. You've got the AP, you've got the hits, you've got the damage, you just could never wound anything. So I think Grey Knights were sitting at what? They were sitting at 44%, so they were below the Goldilocks zone. I could easily see this bumping them up a couple of percent because they're a good army. They kill things like Dark Angels, they kill Marines. They've got the Stormbolt of Fire to clear off like T3 bodies and stuff. I think they're pretty good.
Good into hordes as well, as I know.
Yep.
With the basically 3 rounds of damage.
Yep. No, but I think anything else to add about Grey Knights, Liam? Otherwise, we'll move on.
No, like as you said, I think they're going to go up a couple of percent in the win rate, but other than that, they got helped in an indirect way. I agree. It's just other armies got slightly worse against them.
All right. Well, if we then move on, the next one on my list is Imperial Knights. Now, as far as I'm aware, Imperial Knights have never had a balanced data slate change, I don't think.
I know of.
No, they're not on the list. They were sitting at what we're looking at 44%, same as Grey Knights. Again, they had no changes. They didn't even really have any like generic changes that affect them in any way. I can't see them changing all that much from this one. They're still.
I think these guys are going to remain pretty much the same. Nothing really changed, in my opinion. Like, don't get me wrong, they can hurt Deathwing harder, but realistically, we're going to see a list change from Deathwing to more Ravenwing based armies, which do have the damage output to still kill Knights.
Yep, I agree. I think Knights' biggest issue has never been rules. It's literally been the terrain rules. The fact that Knights have to take one big Knight to buff up all the Armigers and then that big knight can just be one shot from behind a ruin that it can't see you through, so you can shoot it and it just can't shoot you, which is some janky bullshit. But
yeah.
I think they'll remain pretty much the same. Like, I can't see them changing all that much, which is a shame. But I know we've also always said that, like, you never want a meta where, like, Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights are the tops, because that just sucks. You can't kill anything, and it just kills you.
You just can't. It's so difficult to balance an army that only has
like, say you take
models, 3, 8 models.
Yeah,
it's so difficult to balance that.
Yeah.
You know,
no, it's like impossible. So if we move on from Imperial Knights, obviously under Imperium, the only thing we've now got left is Space Marines of a million different flavors.
Hey.
I know you love a Space Marine league.
So over to you, Joe, for this one.
Yeah, so if we want to start with like the 3 Codex non-compliant ones, so you've got Blood Angels and Space Wolves are the 2 I'll try and kind of do together. Sorry. Blood Angels were the end of the last balanced data slate. They were picking up a storm. They were amazing. You just had your massive Sangari Guard blocks that were running around, doing really well at tournaments, and then they got dropped off the face of the earth and are now back down to a 43% win rate, which is sad. I think mainly because they had very good secondaries that they just lost access to, and then they kind of struggling a little bit. Like the change to Codex Warfare doesn't matter as much when you can't run a heavy shooting army. Like, they still need to wait till turn 3 to score those points, and then even when they get there, they need to kill 15 units after turn 3. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I think that's probably why they're down to 43%. Does these changes help them? Massively, because I would say in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, they're still a very good army. And then they would run into Dark Angels, who would go, "Oh, your army chapter tactic is +1 to wound. That's a shame." And that just doesn't exist anymore. And I think the other things that are going to be top of the meta, things like demons, don't be wrong, they still get their demon saves, but they're getting +1 to wound, so they're going to be winning a lot of the stuff on 2s. Even the big things, they're going to be winning on 4s that aren't Be'lakor. Don't be wrong, I know Be'lakor's still an issue, but I think they're going to go up a few percent. I don't think massively, but I think it might push them into the Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, I think, well, so when it comes to Blood Angels especially, I do think I don't know if they'll reach the Goldilocks zone. I do think they're going to stay mostly the same, but if they did change, they'll certainly go up, I think.
Yeah, they're not going to go down.
I think I'm with Leon on. I can't see them really changing much.
But we'll agree to disagree.
For the reasons that you said, though,
yeah.
Basically they go into the bad matchups pretty much the same anyway, and maybe a little bit better against, but not significantly. So no,
that's fair.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, the other non-Codex compliant one is Space Wolves, who were sitting at a 50% win rate before all this. Can't see them changing much, to be honest. I think they're going to remain pretty much exactly the same. I think the one place that they are really going to struggle into, and the same actually with Blood Angels, is World Eaters. They're both pretty melee-heavy armies, and World Eaters just go, "Cool, I'm going to fight on death," and you can't trade with World Eaters. And you are going to run into World Eaters at top tables. It's going to happen. Definitely. And when you do, you just don't have a game. Things like Wolfen run into a unit of Berserkers, and cool, they kill them, but then the Berserkers just kill the Wolfen back, which is just not a trade you want to be doing with Space Wolves. They were benefiting quite a lot from the Codex Warfare thing, because Long Fangs were very good. They could ignore modifiers. You could have Desolators shooting out of line of sight and just ignoring the modifiers as well. Desolators, isn't it? Yeah, they are called Desolators.
Yeah.
Desolators or Desolation Marines?
Called a Desolation Squad, so choose what you like. You can call them Desolators.
Yeah. I'll accept Desolator.
Yeah, so I think they're still going to hover around 50%. Whether it will go up or down, I'm not sure. I think it might go down 1% just from the change to Codex Warfare, because they were very good at scoring the heavy one. But we'll wait and see, I guess. Then the other non-Codex compliant ones, you've got Dark Angels, obviously. Now, this is probably the biggest change of the entire balanced data slate. Dark Angels were the absolute boogeymen. They were sitting at like a 57 to 60% win rate week in, week out. Their season win rate was 57%. And it was literally just down to basically Deathwing are just dumb. The fact they were running around with like a 0-up save if they were in cover. They were transhuman. They had -1 damage. They hit like an absolute truck. They were OBSEC. Pretty sure they're OBSEC, Liam?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they were OBSEC if the entire army was Deathwing, which is really common now.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop people from taking the Warlord trait. That makes them upset.
Yeah, Rights of War.
Mm-hmm.
They were just nuts. So I think even us, we thought they were going to knock the inner circle ability, which is the transhuman. They would knock it down to like mini transhuman, where you can't be wounded on a 2, and they just removed it. It's just gone. Which honestly, I'm massively happy about. Army-wide transhuman just shouldn't be a thing. It sucks.
I do sympathise with Dark Angels players a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it needed to go, and I'm more than happy that it's gone. But the fact now that Inner Circle, sure, it gives you auto pass morale, but now it actually has a pretty big downside and no big upside. I can understand the frustration.
Yeah.
Like now, sure, you ignore morale, but then there's a chance that you can't fall back from combat, which can mean the difference between being able to kill a squad and not being able to kill a squad.
Yeah, especially with the whole heavy thing now being restricted, you want to get those 5, because you can only score 5 points in the heavy doctrine. You want to get those 5 points in like your first turn and your second turn, if not even just in the first turn. So if you're then stuck in combat and can't shoot something, sure, you're a Terminator. You're then going to kill it in the assault phase, but you're not going to score any points for it, which sucks.
In my opinion, what I expected them to change and what I think they should have done was remove the Inner Circle transhuman for everything except characters.
Yeah, I
think
see that.
Characters should have kept it, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's obviously the other thing to make note about Dark Angels. Lionel Johnson has now come out, or at least his rules anyway. I don't think the model is actually out yet.
It is on pre-order as of the time recording this.
So. Yeah, so I do think with Inner Circle being gone, you probably that second 10-man or 2 5-man units you were running, you probably just take the Lion instead. I think even if he might not be the best use of 300, I want to say he's 320 points, something like that.
Yes. Yeah, he is.
Even if there might be better uses for it, he's a Primarch. You're running because he's cool as hell.
You've been waiting for him for so long.
Yeah. And he is an absolute blender in combat. I think he's just very squishy. I think that's his main issue. He has no real defensive abilities whatsoever. So I think if you misplay him or mispositioned him, he is just going to get killed.
Yeah, definitely. He's, as you said, he's a blender in combat, but nothing about him is durable.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So cool.
I mean, he's amazing. He's definitely, in my opinion, behind Mortarion, the coolest Primarch model they've ever made. And I think
hey,
Liam sitting there with his anger.
That's a whole other video, right?
And I think, I think they're still going to sit at like 52, 53% win rate, but I could easily see them losing them like 5% in their win rate.
Yeah, the lists are just going to massively change. They're going to switch from Deathwing to Ravenwing.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's going to be.
Yeah.
So then finally, the last non-codex compliant chapter is Deathwatch, which coincidentally I already have up.
Boy.
They were, this is me, I have about 7,000 points of Deathwatch. I've got a ludicrous amount of them. They were garbage. They were they were so bad, people were deliberately breaking the rules of the codex to not hamper themselves. They weren't just bad, the book fundamentally did not work with the way that rules had changed. So they've now changed that, so it doesn't do that. So mission tactics does actually work how it's supposed to now, so you don't have to run a random Inquisitor for 75 points just to break your chapter tactic.
It's the fact that this is a balance update, and this should never have been a balance update. This should have been FAQ'd immediately, and this is not a balance update to say, hey, your army works now. It's like, no, it should have always been this way, but oh well.
And then the other change they got was Cull Order, which is one of their unique secondaries. It's basically you pick 3 unit types in the opponent's army, so like you pick troops, elites, and heavy. Before, as long as you killed all of that type in the opponent's army, you scored 5 points. They've now added an addendum where as long as you kill at least one of those units, you get 3 points per. So realistically, most of the time, you're gonna kill 1 unit from 2 of them, and then you're going to wipe the 3rd one and score 11 points, which makes it a pretty good secondary. I don't think it's even remotely enough. Deathwatch is still going to be really bad. They were sitting at a 35% win rate. I could see them maybe getting to like 37, 38, but they're still paying a premium for war gear that everyone else gets for free. I can't see it changing. I still think they'll be the worst faction in the game, which is just sad.
Unfortunately, I agree.
Yeah. And then finally, obviously, if we've covered all the non-codex compliant chapters, you've then got all the ones that just sit under the base codexes. So your Imperial Fists, your Ultramarines, your Salamanders, your Raven Guard, White Scars. Missed any? And Iron Hands. It's always kind of been the problem of counting all these factions together because they are so wildly different. Iron Hands are amazing. All the other ones, I would say, are kind of bad. So Iron Hands prop up the win rate, and then everyone goes, "Oh, Space Marines are fine," whilst Imperial Fists are sitting there with their 40% win rate or whatever it is. Again,
it depends how that one guy who's playing them got on that one weekend.
You're damn right.
Basically, if he wins 2 out of 3, we've got 60%.
Yep. Yeah. And I can't really see this changing.
I think it's going to go down.
Yeah.
Personally, because Space Marines got one change, but I think it's going to impact a lot of the matchups that Marines have, or in this case, armies that didn't really want to go into Marines with a specific unit. So the secondary Codex Warfare, I think that's the name of it, got changed. So you can now only score a maximum of 5 victory points per doctrine. So you can only score 5 with heavy weapons, 5 with assault, and 5 in melee, so on and so on. I do think this means, because Codex Warfare is no longer a auto 15, people are either going to not run Codex Warfare and stick to the heavy weapons, or they're going to want to take a mix of weapons and progress through the doctrines throughout the game. The main thing is, if people do try and switch through the doctrines throughout the game to maximize the scoring potential on it, it means after turn 1 or maybe turn 2, Desolator Marines become significantly worse with their out of line of sight shooting, because the external launcher only becomes AP -1, and when it's outside the heavy doctrine, of course. And this is massive for armies like Eldari, Sisters, and Guard, because it means these units that were before killing the Kassakin or, I don't know, some Banshees or Scorpions from out of line of sight are no longer going to be as prominent as they once were. And so I think, I was just going to say, I think it's going to affect the win rate in that way.
Yeah, I mean, things like you said, they were good for going, right, those 10-man blobs of Kassakin, I'm going to shoot them out of line of sight, kill them before they become a problem. I might not wipe the squad, but I'll reduce it down to 5 or 6 guys, and then it's much less of a threat. Whereas now, if you don't ignore cover, you go into Tactical Doctrine because you need to score points, and suddenly that Kassakin gets a 3-up save from behind a wall if he's standing in cover, and then you just do nothing, because you don't actually have the number of shots to clear them. You were just relying on them having to roll a fairly bad save.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, and it's going to play into a lot of factions, actually. That change.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're sitting at a 49% win rate right now. I could see that dropping 1% or 2, because ultimately they did just get a nerf. So we'll wait and see, I guess.
Yeah.
But that covers all the Imperial factions. If we want to move on to Chaos next, obviously the first one on my list is Chaos Demons. So throughout the balanced data slate history, Chaos Demons have only ever had one change, which was the nerf to Flamers. Thank God.
Yeah.
When Flamers came out, they auto-hit. They no longer auto-hit, which is weird for a unit called Flamers, but absolutely fine by me because they were utterly ridiculous. They are still really good now. They're still really good for 25 points, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because they are still really good. But they're balanced. But I do think Chaos Demon's going to come out of this data slate as probably, if not the strongest faction in the game, because, well, Liam, you're the Chaos Demons player, so go nuts.
Dave also plays Chaos Demons, but
only newly, but yeah,
of course. But at the very least, they will definitely be top 3, because they got no changes, and the changes to all the other armies, which on the most part have been nerfs. There's been slight buffs to armies that were underperforming, but on the whole, it's been nerfed to the top armies. And Chaos Demons were performing pretty well. So the fact that their matchups, which were probably keeping them from winning tournaments and such, now are much easier for them. So
it's made life that much easier. I definitely certainly not going to be going down.
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
win rate.
You're going to see them perform the same, if not slightly better. I was amazed Reality Rebels didn't change, especially since they were nerfing other secondaries. But
yeah, that's always been a nice one.
Yeah, Demons are still strong. Flames are still really good. Fleshhounds are criminally undercosted for what they do. Fiends are also incredible. I only properly looked at what they did recently, and they're amazing. Be'lakor is Be'lakor. The Bloodthirster is the Bloodthirster. Everyone knows what they do. Yeah, I think they're gonna be really, really good.
Stuff you didn't mention, like things like Keepers of Secrets, they're not bad. It's just the other stuff is so outrageously good you don't really see them. Even things like running the Lord of Change isn't in every list, even though he's incredible, because you just don't need it. And I think whatever this last change does actually cause to the meta, demons will easily be able to adapt to it, which I think is another thing of why, as we're saying, they're probably going to be in the top 3, because whatever changes, they're going to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
So that's Chaos Demons. The next one is obviously Chaos Knights. Again, don't think they've ever had any actual changes in the balanced data slate, as far as I can see.
None that I can think.
No, I can't think of any either. Again, they've always been a pretty balanced codex. I think you've always been encouraged to run Armigers. Like with Imperial Knights, as we said, you need to run that one big knight to hand out your I think they're called household bonds or something like that.
Yes.
Chaos Knights don't have that. They're just designed to individually run stronger. They don't have as much synergy. They don't play alongside each other, which is actually better in some ways, I think, because it lets you can split your army up, you can go where you need to, you can contest objectives, and you don't need to worry about keeping your models together, which is much more handy when you've got, I don't know, like 11 models or whatever. But most Chaos Knight lists aren't even running a big knight. They're just running all Armigers, a load of shooting, a couple of melee ones to like contest objectives and stuff like that. But mainly their plan is, and always has been, just shoot you off the board before you can really do much about it. It's not a complicated book, and it shows it's sitting a 47% win rate. So I can't see that changing massively. Again, they've had a couple of easier matchups, so maybe they go up 1% or 2%, but no massive sweeping changes that I think is really going to make any difference.
I agree. I think they're going to stick at around the 50%.
Yeah.
Maybe get a bit closer towards it, but yeah, on the whole, I think they'll stay the same. As you said, nothing really changed for them. It was just the other armies around them that changed.
Yeah.
So the next one is Chaos Space Marines. This is, again, it's the same as Codex Space Marines, where you've got 5 different factions all sitting in the same book with unique rules that radically change how the army is actually going to play. So the Chaos Space Marine Codex as a whole sits at 46% win rate across the season. Chaos Space Marines have had a massively topsy-turvy, uppy-down since their book came out. When they came out, Emperor's Children were nuts. Actually, no, to be fair, when they came out, Children of Baal? No, Creations of Baal were the nuts one. Then people kind of realised, hang on, Emperor's Children are just as good, if not better. And then all the other books, or all the other chapters got nerfed because they basically shared the same units. So Terminators went up in points cost, Mark of Slanesh went up in points cost. So things like My Night Lords just became kind of bad. They got massive points nerfs they didn't need. My list went up nearly 200 on points when it was already just kind of okay.
It was especially worse for Emperor's Children because World Eaters back then when the Codex came out, everything that could take a Mark of Slanesh had to take a Mark of Slanesh, and with its increased point cost, it really added up. Yeah, I mean it's 20 points now. So I'd say you have 6 units, that's an extra 30 points you're spending on just the Mark of Slanesh. Yeah. But overall, again, Chaos Space Marines I think are one of the factions that everybody almost universally agreed needed some buffs because there's just massive disparity between the factions. They were just kind of bad. When Armor of Contempt left, they got no buffs to make up for it, whereas a lot of the other factions that were Power Armor did. And everyone could kind of see straight away they were going to struggle, and they did. And then nothing has changed. So I definitely think they're still going to struggle. Again, it's a case of all the factions around them have gotten a bit worse. No one's really got no one's got buffed to a percentage that's actually going to matter. So I think maybe they'll gain 1% or 2%, but I can't see it changing all that much.
Yeah, same. No major changes.
Yeah, which is a shame because I really like Chaos Space Marines, and I think thematically the book they wrote was probably one of the best ones. It's just turned out to. Yeah, it was just really cool. It was a shame as well because it got such a small period of time to actually be good in. It was kind of like the when we're talking about Custodes, it was only good for I don't know, a couple of months, and then it got the nerf.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that with a lot of that happen with a lot of factions though as well.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, I think that's one thing that's going to happen more with the data slates and the FAQs dropping much quicker than they have been. Like same with Orks. Like the buggies were, I was like, yay, my new codex, and I got it early, so it wasn't officially released for another 4 weeks or 5-6 weeks, whatever. And then I got it, and then 2 weeks later, everything was nerfed.
Yep.
You're like, okay, great, I got it for 2 weeks. So I think that, and I've seen that happen, you know, more and more and more. But it's a double-edged sword. It's what we've all been asking for, is these quick changes and things that are broken, not waiting, you know, 2 years for a fix on it. But the result's going to be that also when you're waiting for that exciting moment where you're going to have a broken codex and then get to use it, it's not going to be broken for very long.
I think it's fine. I think it's.
I agree. That's how it should be.
When they don't do with what they did with Chaos Space, where they massively overcorrect, as long as you correct to the right amount, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Because as much fun as it is when you're the one with the broken codex, at least to me, like when Harlequins were utterly broken, I took them to one tournament and went, yeah, I don't really want to do that again because that just wasn't fun for any of my opponents, and I just didn't play them again for like 2-3 months because it just wasn't fun. And I think that it's much. Games Workshop is slowly doing better at getting reining in the worst offenders. I think the thing they're struggling with now is knowing how to buff up the factions that are really struggling. But I think they're getting quite good at reining in the OP armies, basically.
Yeah, but Chaos Space Marines, again, because you've got all the factions similar to Space Marines, it's difficult for them to balance all of them. One becomes too strong, one becomes too weak. It just doesn't work, you know.
They definitely suffered from their success. Like,
yeah.
Like you said, there were so many ways to run them, and they got one bone thrown at them, which was their secondaries got slightly better. But as you said, with the nerfs that were thrown back at them,
it wasn't enough.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't anywhere near enough.
Yeah.
So obviously, aside from the Chaos Space Marine legions that sit inside the CSM book, you've got two others. You've got Deathguard, which are the first Chaos Space Marine, also the first Chaos faction I collected. I love Deathguard. They're really cool. They've got Mortarion, who's one of my favourite models. But they are sitting at a 41% win rate. Now I took Deathguard to the local St. Albans RTT 2 weeks ago now? Was it 2 weeks last week?
I think it was 1 week ago.
Yeah.
Was it not? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was actually. And I went 2-1. I lost to Liam. Fuck you, Liam.
I'm sorry, what can I say, you know?
It was you and me, we were on second table? Just behind James against someone else. But we were on second table. You had Angron, I had Mortarion. I mean, that's the other thing, right? When I say I was playing Deathguard, I wasn't running hyper-competitive Deathguard. My list was a bit of a meme. I was like, I'm going to take Mortarion, I'm going to rock up to this RTT and just have fun. And I was thinking to myself, as long as I don't play Tau, I'll be fine. As long as I don't get shot off the board because I'm slow, I'll be absolutely fine. So first game, I played Tau, which was great fun. I managed to win because turns out Mortarion is kind of good when your opponents just can't re-roll anything. And you manage to get that right into their lines and then they just can't kill anything. So the 41% win rate does kind of surprise me a little bit, but I can definitely see why they are like that. They're another faction where you go back to 8th and they were in the starter box. So a lot of casual players pick them up. They're one of the most played Chaos factions in the game. And I think because they are so slow, even if you are durable, if you start in a bad position, it's incredibly hard to come back because you just don't have the speed to really affect and change the game. And whilst you do have some units that can do respectable amounts of damage, namely Death Shroud Terminators that do just pick up whatever they look at, things like Blight Lords have a terrible damage output. Plague Marines, unless you kit them out with all the weapons, which I can't be bothered to buy, they're just running around with bolt guns and then they do nothing. Plague Burst Crawlers were affected by the indirect nerf, so I can definitely see why they're sitting at 41%. It's just...
And when you've got Terminators and 8-bound and, things that are dishing out damage that can deal with you.
We saw it in our game, Liam, right? 8-bound didn't do as much damage as they normally did, but they were still just picking up pretty much whatever they ran into. They didn't really struggle.
Yeah.
Deathguard can't have.
No.
They just can't. No. You can't do that.
No. Yeah. If you're just losing units, you don't have enough units because you're paying for that tankiness, and if that tankiness doesn't exist, you're just screwed, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. And especially when you, in your game, you had a big 10-man blob of Terminators with the stench vats in the middle.
Yeah.
And I was terrified of it because I was like, if I charge into this thing, I'm effectively going to fight second and then I'm going to lose my whole unit. It got to, I think, about around 4, where I actually, about around 4 or 5, where I actually charged it and you hit me back. And I was like, is that it? Like, you've only killed like 1 Exalted 8-bound. And Angron took like...
You're forgetting, like, for each of those Terminators, it's 3 attacks with a Power X. Ooh, terrifying.
Yeah, like, I really overestimated how much damage they dealt in melee. Like, as you said, they are really underwhelming.
Yep.
The Blight Lords, not the Death Shroud.
The Death Shroud is still amazing. But yeah, I can see why they're sitting at 41%. But the only other Chaos faction sitting lower than them is Thousand Suns, who are sitting 1% lower than them at 40%. And Thousand Suns are the biggest shame because in the last balanced data slate, when they had their Meta Watch thing, they were talking about, we've recognized that Death Watch and Thousand Suns are the 2 worst factions in the game, and we're going to try and work out, we're not sure how to buff them yet, but we're going to work it out, and then we're going to make them better for you guys. And they just didn't. Thousand Suns just didn't change. They literally did. There was the change to Abhor the Witch, which obviously affects them massively. But in terms of direct changes to Thousand Suns, there was nothing. They literally got nothing, which shocks me because they are not great.
They deserved more. They really did.
Yeah. So I can't see this changing at all. Like, sure, your opponent's not going to score 25 points for killing 4 characters now, but I can't see it changing much, if at all.
Yeah, unless the feedback comes and they decide to do some kind of FAQ just for them, since they promised they were going to do something. But I'd be very, very surprised if that was the case.
Yeah. The problem is that I'm trying to think of what they could have done outside of just the obvious like point decreases or whatever. And I struggle to think of something. Like, you can think of ways to make them more durable, but it's like they've already got rules to make them more durable with All Is Dust and spells that give invuns and everything like that.
It's kind of the problem with Thousand Suns, where they've kind of written themselves into a corner with, they don't have many units, and each of those units is a soulless automaton that walks forwards and fires its gun. It means that you can't really do much with rubrics. Don't get me wrong, you can make them more tanky, but then you end up with like the Armor of Contempt. Maybe that's it. Maybe just give them back Armor of Contempt. But that was fun for nobody because you just couldn't kill anything.
I think, and the problem with the army as well is, like you said, because there's so few units. Like, especially after the Flamer nerf, that was probably the biggest reason why they dropped that down. You look at a Thousand Suns competitive list. You don't even have to read it. You're going to know what it does. It's going to have 1 or 2 big blobs of Scarab Cult Terminators that are going to teleport, have all the buffs stacked on them, and then just be like, try and deal with me. And people have now got to the point where they know what the list is going to do, and they know ways to beat it. Because they've been the same for the past 2 years.
Yeah,
and the other problem is because it's such a limited, number of units. Any changes you do make to one unit then has a very big impact on the actual army, because it's not a small part of that army. It's it's like a third or a half of the entire army every time. It's going to be that unit, so it's quite a big impact. So, and they've obviously gone 10th soon. We don't know how to fix it either, so let's just
leave it.
Nothing to see.
Moving
on.
But yeah, that kind of rounds out Chaos. And I think Chaos are the biggest shame. Oh, go on, Liam.
Well, we got one more faction for Chaos.
Do we?
How can you forget?
Oh, the Worldiers. The newest one.
It's a big scary faction of Chaos.
Worldiers.
It's because we're going from one end of the meta to the other here that you were like, your mind was in a different place.
So Worldiers, obviously, you guys know I love Worldiers. I played them for a very long time. They did not get any changes in this balanced data slate, which, in my opinion, bumps them up to a top 3 army.
And in our opinion,
in my opinion, makes them the best army in the game.
I want to play some games with the balanced data slate before I make a decision, but I am leaning towards they're certainly a top 3 army, potentially the strongest in the game. Because what I found when I've played them is they're incredibly strong into a large variety of matchups, and the main games where I saw people were losing were against armies like Custodes, where they could stack all those debuffs, those 2 stratagems, put them on the same unit, so you're getting no rerolls in transhuman. Deathwing, for obvious reasons, they're transhuman. If you're 8-bound go in and bounce, then it's massive. Like, you're not getting the damage output that you really need to get as World Eaters. Guard is another one. The fact that their mortars could ignore hit roll penalties meant their mortars were actually pretty good at killing 8-bound. And even if you're losing just 1 8-bound in a shooting phase,
Massive.
that's 7 less attacks.
Yeah.
You know, like
Kassakin popping up turn 1 and just you know, popping off 6 mortals plus your 7, 8 saves onto, you know.
I can't deal with 4 8-bound, but if there's 2 of them by the time they reach you, they're still going to do a lot of damage, but they're not going to wipe the squad and they're going to die.
Yeah,
Manageable.
And those were all of our worst matchups, the ones that I would go into and be like, okay, I'm a bit worried now. You know, these rules make it so my army doesn't do what I want it to do. And now none of them exist really anymore. Transhuman's gone. The Finial no longer ignores the hit roll and ballistic skill penalties. Custodes can't stack all their debuffs on 1 unit. Like, now, World Eaters, their amount of bad matchups for them has been drastically reduced.
I mean, 2 of your worst ones definitely were Guard and Deathwing.
Yeah.
And you can now kill Deathwing, and Guard can't kill you anywhere near as well as they could. It's just a straight up.
Like, Guards still have damage output, and it's tricky, but I've been using Angron for a little while now, and if Angron even gets 1 turn where he tags something in combat, he it flips the matchup so quickly.
Yeah.
And then he's just going to be running around and destroying absolutely everything in the opponent's
army.
I
mean, I think, especially with World Eaters, like if we look at your list in particular, where you're running World Eaters, you've then got Angron, and then you've also got 2 Armigers for shooting. It's what I think I said to you in chat the other day. Your list has so many stat checks where I think I listed like 6 or 7, and I said if you can't deal with at least 6 of these, you just lose. And that hasn't changed. And the 2 armies that maybe could deal with all 7 of those now can't. So that's why I think they are just the best faction in the game. They score incredibly well. They hit harder than any other army in the game. The only thing they are not is tanky. And even then, Angron is tanky in that he just comes back to life and just doesn't care if he dies.
And half the time just can't be shot.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they're the best army in the game, and I
was very surprised in that, given that the other changes they did, the fact that Pile the Skulls, our secondary, remained unchanged is a crime.
Yep.
Like, it blows my mind that it stayed the same.
Yeah, like normally, if your secondaries are you score points for doing what you were going to do anyway, they should be capped at 12, in my opinion. It's the secondaries that have to require you to take units and stop them doing what they want. Like, if a unit is standing on an objective doing an action, it's not killing something, or it's not moving somewhere, or move blocking, then it should only be able to score 12 points for doing that action. World Eaters are just, you score 15 for killing things.
But it's more than that.
And
because
dying.
Pile the Skulls takes it. So like you said, secondaries are good when they score you points for doing what you already want to do. Pile the Skulls takes that to another level, in the sense that it rewards you for what you want to do, but you're also still scoring it when things aren't going your way. Like, no matter
you're
how
getting
the game
rewarded
goes,
for what your opponent wants to do as well.
Exactly. No matter how the game goes, it also ties into Blood God's Due, where you're soaking the objectives in blood. No matter how the game goes, whether it's going well for you or bad for you, you are still going to score those points, because they're guaranteed, pretty much.
You're going to score 15 points on Pile the Skulls every game, without doubt. I don't it's what we said when we read one of the articles the other day. How is the average VP of Pile the Skulls not 15? I don't understand. Like,
the only reason I can think of why the average is not 15 is either people are actively trying not to max it, or they make a genuine mistake.
Yeah.
Like, they made a mistake in that they purchased a Blood Tithe, forgetting about the secondary, and then being like, or maybe they took a gamble, they purchased a Blood Tithe reward, and then banked on killing a vehicle that they thought they might have been able to with that Blood Tithe reward. But realistically, if you take a couple of minutes to sit back, think, all right, I've got a plan, Pile the Skulls in advance, you should score 15 on it in every game.
It's just nuts. It's just the best secondary in the game by a considerable margin.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's why I think, off the top of my head, think of another secondary that rewards you
For losing.
For rewards for your basically but for your opponent can do it for you. I can't think of any other secondary that allows your opponent to score points for you.
The Salamanders one, Forged in Battle. If you get shot at while standing on an objective, you score points. That's it. The only other one I can think of. But yeah, so World Eaters are sitting at 54%. I could easily see that approaching 60 now because
that's not going to go down.
They were running into Dark Angels at the top table and struggling because they couldn't kill Deathwing Terminators. Now, a unit of 8-bound runs in and probably just deletes most of the unit, if not all of it. It's just nuts.
Especially since 8-bound sergeants, champions, that were, when you gave them Red Butchers, they were like, they suddenly become like the best thing for killing Deathwing Terminators. Because their attacks are flat 4 damage, so even with the -1 damage, each one is still killing 1. And it's strength 8, so it went from winning on 4s to 2s.
Yeah, nuts.
It's massive, huge.
It's huge.
But yeah, so I think World Eaters they're gonna go up towards the 60, and I think we're gonna see 2 months of World Eaters just demolishing pretty much everything they want to demolish.
Especially people run Angron.
Yeah.
After playing Angron for I want to say 8 tournament games now, might be more, I forget. Angron is better than Lord Invocatus. I will die on this hill.
Change my mind.
And you just might in the comment section. Yeah, but
bring it on. Honestly, like after using him for, kind of ties into one of our previous videos where I was talking about Angron and why I think he might be better. He is better. He is absolutely incredible. The no fallback aura that he provides has won me probably, I would say, 5 out of 8 of those games.
He's outrageous. He's up there with like one of the best models in the game.
If the Silent King didn't exist, he would be the best model in the game.
I agree. Yeah. Okay, so that kind of rounds off Chaos. Obviously, World Eater's incredible. The rest of them, I think we can agree, kind of bad. Could have done with a bit more of a buff. Didn't really get it. World Eaters are going to go up a bunch of percent. Everyone else probably going to stay about the same. The next one we've got, obviously, is Eldari. Now, Eldari is the different branches of Eldari, like Craftworlds, Drukhari, Ynnari, Harlequins, are all very different, and they've all had very different stories of getting to where they have finally got to at the end of 9th edition. So if we start off with Craftworlds, Craftworlds are sitting at, a 51% win rate right now. I would say overall, bar a couple of outliers, they've been a pretty balanced book. There are definitely some units in there that are too good, some that are too bad.
I agree once Hail of Doom was reined in.
Yeah. I was going to say, they had a brief period when the book dropped where they were a bit nuts. But it was Hail of Doom. Like, I'll be real, nothing else about the book was inherently busted, but Hail of Doom was seen everywhere, and it was horrible to play against.
I mean, it shows you how good Hail of Doom was, that it was nerfed, and it's still probably the best way to play the book. Not because the rest of the book is bad, it's just Hail of Doom is so outrageously good that you still run it now. But I can't really see the Craftworlds win rate changing much. Maybe it goes up a percent because, again, they didn't receive any changes and everyone else around them received nerfs.
Yeah.
I think if it did change, it's going to tie into what I said previously with the fact that the Marines change, you might see Desolation Squads less, which were a big problem for Eldari. Yeah. The fact that...
also, again, as well, if they're getting to those top table matchups towards the end, it could be the difference between winning the tournament against Deathwing, might be able to make that more manageable now. Might start winning a few tournaments here and there rather than getting the 5th, 6th where you lose that final game and drop back a few places. So,
and I feel as well that Eldari do have one of the few techs that make World Eaters a bit of an easier matchup for them, mainly because they're Phoenix Lords. Like, I've played against Eldari where when they dropped Baharoth in my back lines, he was just kind of sitting there, and I was looking at the table, and I was just like, guess he's there now. Can't do anything about him. I could deal with him, but then I'm losing 10 Berserkers doing so. So I do think that they will have better play into World Eaters if their other matchups become better, because then they're more likely to reach those top tables where we feel that World Eaters will be. I think they'll stay the same. Probably, if anything, go up.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So the next one you got after Craftworlds is we've got Drukhari. Drukhari are sitting at a 44% win rate right now, which is not great. It's outside the Goldilocks zone by 1%. Drukhari
They
are
did
another
get
one of
some
those
changes though, didn't they? The data slate.
Yeah, so the Talos and the Kronos, which are the big homunculus monster thingies, are now both core again. They were core when the book came out, then they had it taken away from them, and they are now core again. They basically were paying the sins for the days of Thick City, where you just ran as many of those things as you could, and you just had an unkillable, well, it wasn't unkillable, but just incredibly hard to kill Death Ball, walking slowly up the board, backed up by Fight Last Incubi and stuff like that. I think this is a change that will help them a bit. They'll go up some percent, but it's not a huge change, and I think ultimately a lot of the problems that they had still exist, where people aren't struggling to kill their transports anymore, and then when they fall out, they're just T3 bodies with a 3-up save or a 4-up save or a 5-up save, and they just die.
Yeah.
I don't know Drukhari too well. I know like the general rules of their book, but I'm not sure. Talos and Kronos getting their core back is really good. I'm yet to be convinced if people will simply include a couple of them, or if they'll go back to the days of Thick City where they'll revolve the whole army around them.
Yeah.
I'm kind of unsure, and I'd like to see what happens, because core on them is a big deal, and I'm curious to see if it's enough to make people go back to the way they used to play.
It just gives you, because the thing Drukhari didn't have really, they're a trading army and they always will be, but they didn't have, in the scenarios where you did need like a block of something to put on an objective and just sit there and get shot at, they didn't have that, but now they do have it again, and I'm curious to see whether people will actually start using that, or if they'll just stay in playing the trading game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's going to be one to watch.
Yeah.
See, which way it goes.
Yeah, so I can see them going up a couple of percent. I'd definitely say they're probably, with the changes to everyone around them, and then them getting maybe a small, maybe a bigger buff than we're giving it credit for, they'll definitely go up into the Goldilocks zone, but it's probably not going to be more than a couple of percent, something like that.
Yeah.
So the next one we've got Harlequins. Harlequins are currently sitting at a 45% win rate. Now, I would think we could all agree, bar maybe Tyranids, Harlequins have had the biggest impact on the meta. When they came out, they were horrendous. They never really stopped being horrendous until the last nerf, where they got hit with a sledgehammer so hard they dropped like 15% win rate.
Yeah.
So obviously when they first came out, Void Weavers were incredible, so they went up. I think they nearly doubled in cost. They went from like 75 points to 130, something like that. That knocked off some of their win rate, but they were still incredible because they're just really hard to kill. They hit like a sledgehammer. They score incredibly easily. Then was there a second? I feel like there was a second round of nerfs, but I can't remember what they were.
So their Luck of the Laughing God dice changed.
That was it, yeah. So they didn't get any Luck of the Laughing God for free. They had to roll for it. Still, they were pretty good, like 54%, something like that. They were still sitting pretty. So then in the end, they went, screw it, we're just going to reduce all their invuln saves by 1 and revert a lot of the previous nerfs. Which hit them like an absolute truck, because it basically meant they could not... You pointed anything at them. You point a bolt gun at a unit of Harlequins and it will kill them. Because they are literally toughness 3 guys with a 5-up invuln. They die to pretty much anything. Even their boats that used to be really annoying to kill because they could squiff it and roll a couple of lucky 4s. When you need to roll a couple of lucky 5s, that just doesn't happen as much.
Yeah. I think the biggest, at least the times where I've played, the biggest times it's come up where troops went from a 4-up invuln to a 5-up is when the enemy player would get their troops, kill whatever they charged, and then tag something else, thinking, hey, I'm -1 to hit, I've got a 4-up invuln. Even if I lose a couple of guys, I'll probably still survive. But now the fact that they've gone from a 50% chance of not dying to a 33% chance, people don't really want to do that.
Say you're playing guard, like you charge in and you kill 10 guardsmen, you think, right, I'll tag these other 10 guardsmen so that they can't fall back. If those 10 guardsmen get to hit you back, sure, it's only 10 attacks from guardsmen, but it might kill the squad.
It will need some good rolls, but it's now the fact that you also need good, like, let's say they spike and they roll well. Before, it was like you got a 4-up invuln, it's easier for you to spike and survive the attacks.
No, you just don't. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And I still think they definitely have play, but they are an incredibly skill-based army now. You need to know exactly when to trade, exactly what you can afford to risk, and you almost need to have your entire game planned out, like all 5 turns, and you need to be able to allocate the exact amount of resources per turn, because whatever you allocate is dead. There's no argument. Whatever you put out in the open is dead that turn. it's
and it's
just
not pointed well enough.
No.
To just be able to trade left, right, and centre like a lot of people can.
Yeah, but they still have those amazing trading pieces like the Troop Masters, like the Death Jesters, like troops that can just run 1,000,000 inches out of a transport and jump on an objective. But you need to know the army inside and out, like more than any other army.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they didn't, as we were discussing before, they didn't really get any changes this data slate. I know they got some previously.
Don't think so.
But again, the only thing I can think of is you might see Desolation Marines less, but even they weren't a big impact into Harlequins because everything they had was in a transport anyway. So
yeah,
I can't
not a lot's
imagine
going to change.
I can't imagine these guys will change an awful lot. But if they do, hey, like it won't be to the crazy rates that they were at beforehand. I can't see them going down at the very least. They'll definitely go up if they do change.
And then finally under Eldari, we've also got Ynnari. Now Ynnari are like the weirdest army in the game, where they're just a weird. I don't think they've ever had any direct changes, have they? No. Just a weird hodgepodge of you can take bits from all other 3 armies. You basically replace all their rules and you give them Ynnari rules. They also have the Incarn, which again is like probably one of the best models in the game, because if you know how to play that model and your opponent doesn't know how to play against it, it'll just win you the game.
Yeah.
Again, they're sitting at a 55% win rate right now, which is just inside the okay side of the Goldilocks zone. If they go up 1%, according to Games Workshop, they're broken. I could easily see them going up to 56%. Like, the Incarn especially struggled into Dark Angels because he ignores their invulns, and then was like, I think it's like -3 or -4, so he was putting them on a bad save, but then he was wounding them on 4s, and he doesn't do that now. So I can easily see the Incarn does just run into like Terminator bricks and kill like half of them.
Yeah, and again, it ties into what we're talking about Desolation Marines and the fact you'll see mortars less. A lot of Ynnari playstyle, at least from what I've seen, is all about those striking scorpions and banshees and troops that they've allied in. Not in transports, in ruins, staging their charges for the next turn. And because when they have fight first, they can really capitalize on, even if they get countercharged, it's still not too bad. But if they're being shot at when they thought they were safe, obviously it's not great for them. And now that you're going to see mortars less, still not sure if you see Desolators.
The finial change is the biggest one, obviously, because they can just lightning fast, and then they then basically have -2 to hit, so those mortars are hitting them on 6s. Like, they go from hitting them on 4s to hitting them on 6s, and then they basically do nothing.
Exactly.
So I could definitely see them going up a couple of %, and then I think Ynnari are definitely up there in contention of you need to know how to play the army very well, but if you do, they are one of the best armies in the game.
100%.
Yeah. So that kind of rounds out the Eldari. As we said, Eldari are a bit of a mix. You've got like Craftworlds sitting pretty much bang on perfectly. You've got Ynnari sitting as an outlier of maybe being too good. Let's be blunt, it's not a maybe, they are probably too good.
Yeah.
And then you've got Drukhari and Harlequins who are underperforming. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But overall, I think Eldari have been okay out of this. Finally, you've got the other Xenos races. If we start with like the Tyranids first, because Liam loves a Tyranid.
I love a bug.
Wow.
So
go on.
Yeah, so I mean, Tyranids did get a couple of changes this balanced data slate. Mainly, they reverted a couple of the nerfs. So you used to had to take a Hive Tyrant as your warlord in one of the previous data slates. They got rid of that, so now it can be any warlord. Now, if your warlord dies as well, you still get your imperatives, which I'm happy they reverted the nerf for balance reasons, but I kind of liked it in a sense that if your warlord dies, you lost your imperatives. It's very fluffy for the army. You know, you lose the commander for Tyranids. The rest of the beasts kind of revert to basic beasts that aren't as cohesive. Yeah, so I was actually fine with this nerf. The next nerf that got reverted, though, and I'm very, very happy this got reverted, was our adaptive trait. So the second part of our chapter tactic, we can now swap it out at the beginning of the game instead of having it to write it on our list. I was really annoyed that this was a thing in the first place when they initially nerfed it, because it's so in the same theme of the last point that I mentioned. It's so on theme for Tyranids to be able to adapt to the enemy that they're facing, and not being able to do that and having to write into your list, like, it defeated the whole point of why people play Tyranids. And I'm really, really happy this got reverted. I don't think it's going to have a massive impact on their win rate, But it's nice to see that it's back.
I mean, I think especially that rule with like being able to see your opponent's list and then change is fine when they're in the position they are now, where they're just kind of in the pack. They've got people around them. The problem is when you're already better than everyone else, and then you can go, I'm going to be specifically better where I need to be. It was just way too much. But I think you are right. Now it's fine. And I definitely think, because I mean, Tyranids are right now at 43%. That's one of the lowest ones in the game. I think they're definitely going to go up a few percent from this, but I definitely feel like with Tyranids, the damage is already done. A lot of people have just stopped playing them. They've moved on to other armies.
At the end of the day, some of the units are just too expensive. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not about to say Nids weren't that bad. What are you guys on about? They were disgusting. But Zoanthropes at 70 points per model, Raveners at 45. You compare that to the Space Marine, like, don't get me wrong, Space Marines as a whole, their rules aren't as strong. But when you compare datasheet to datasheet, where a Death Marine Terminator was 33 points and a Ravener was 45, it's like, what are you doing? Come on. But yeah, I think on the whole, as you said, they might go up. I'm not convinced it's enough to make them get to the Goldilocks zone. I think they're going to stay at around 44%, personally.
I agree. I reckon they'll probably hit 45 and then they'll stay there. I think that'll be where they end it out. And I think for the amount of time they were sitting at like 60%, fuck them, they can stay at 45.
They're about to get a whole new range as well. They're going to get so much love.
You've got plenty to look forward to, Tyranid players. So it's fine. It's fine. It's a few weeks to 9th, and then you get all your new stuff.
So carrying on from Tyranids, we've got the other like Nid army, which is Genestealer Cult. Obviously, I know Genestealer Cult, one of those armies that they've had a couple. It's not on here, is it? It's in the generic secondaries. Yes. They're one of those armies that most people have just never played against because so few people collect Genestealer Cult. A, because you need to have 1 million models. B, those models cost a ridiculous amount of money. So of course Liam's got them.
I love Genestealer Cult, and I played them a lot when their book dropped. I took them to a few tournaments, but I'll be real. The main reason that I don't play them as much as my other armies is I finish a 5-game weekend and my brain is done.
They're a complicated army.
They're very complicated. The finesse you need to play the army well, it takes tolls on my little feeble mind, you know?
They're one of those armies that has an incredibly high skill floor and ceiling, but there's so few people who play them that everybody, the vast majority of people who do play them, fit within that boundary, which is why, despite that skill floor, they still have a 57% win rate, which is kind of nuts. Mainly, again, because in the last data slate before this, not even, actually, it wasn't even a data slate, it was Arks of Omen, wasn't it? That gave them the ridiculous secondaries. They're one of those armies that could pretty much appear on the board and like score 45 on their secondaries, or like 40 something. Because I think a couple of those capped at 12.
So it wasn't at the actual Genestealer Cult secondaries that made them busted, because only one of their secondaries was really, really good, which we're going to talk about because it did get changed in this balanced data slate. It was the fact that other secondaries, like Behind Enemy Lines, got a big buff. But in fact, no, because Behind Enemy Lines, I'm fairly certain, is in the same category as Brood Swarm.
No. You took Brood Swarm, you took Cult Ambush. I don't think it's called Cult Ambush. It's called like Ambush or something like that. And then you took a third one that was like, I don't know, Warp Ritual or something. But
actually R&D or something.
Yeah, something like that, like an easy 12.
R&D's pretty common,
But the ambush one, because I know the ambush one is just kill stuff with things that have arrived from reserve in various different ways. Again, they can do that every turn. Brood Swarm is like have more stuff in various parts of the board and score points depending on how many conditions you achieve. Again, the army has 1 million models. They're never going to struggle with that. And they could just very easily score like max points on those 2 secondaries. And then their third one, they took R&D and probably scored it as well because they could deep strike within 3, so you couldn't really screen them out. So they just had an incredibly strong secondary game. They're another one of those armies that you look at something and it dies because it doesn't even have a 5-up invuln. It just has a 5-up save. So you shoot it with like -2 and it just dies. But it didn't matter because they had 1 million models.
There's lots of them.
And they could hit like an absolute truck when they needed to. Don't get me wrong, things like Aberrants were still pretty bad, but the actual, I don't know the names of the guys, Liam, the basic dudes with guns.
With the mining drills.
With like the mining drills and the mining lasers and stuff.
They play more than you think.
When you were stacking like the +1 to hit and the +1 to wound from crossfire, suddenly they could do really well. And that has kind of led to them having a 57% win rate. But as Liam, you said, they did get one change, which is their Brood Swarm, which is the have units in very different parts of the board and more than your opponent, had, I think it was 5 conditions it had before, so you could score a maximum of 5 per turn, which realistically you could do without too much difficulty, at least scoring 4, so you were going to get like 4, 8, 12, 16, and like max it in 4 turns. Now you can only score, there are only 3 conditions, and one of them is have more units in your opponent's deployment zone. Is it deployment zone, Liam?
Yeah, so it's for each one you have to have more of your models than opponent models in a zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's no man's land, your own deployment zone, and the enemy deployment zone.
Yeah.
So it's pretty safe to say, unless you're against Knights, you're never going to max this.
So I think it's still a very reliable 10, because I think with the amount of models you have, you're always going to do the first 2 conditions. And then if you manage to do the deployment zone thing, like, I don't know, maybe 1 turn, maybe 2, like an 11, 12 point secondary that's very reliable is still very good.
Yeah, it's still going to be...
To my mind, that's how all secondaries should really work.
Yeah.
You know, all this, like, there's so many, when it's a 15, it's max 15, or it's an 8, it's not even in consideration.
Yeah.
Nearly all secondaries should be sort of, it's a 10. 10's more or less doable every time. Anything beyond that, you've really had to play to get it.
Yeah.
That would really, and I think that would really help, with a lot of games.
Part of the Skulls definitely feels that way. Yeah, you really got to work.
Those 15 points.
Yeah, exactly. Stand there and die, these damn spawns.
But yeah, I think, so as we said, they're sitting at 57% win rate right now. I can see that dropping a couple of percent maybe because of the Brood Swarm change. And I think when you are an army that can just be taken off the board so easily, you need to be able to score those points easily. So I can see it dropping them a couple of percent, but ultimately I still think they're going to end up at like 55% and like finish maybe in the top 3, maybe top 4.
Yeah, I think they'll still be top because... Sorry, Dave, you want to say something?
No, go on.
I was going to say, their secondary got worse. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, that you're not going to score 15. You're going to score realistically more like 11, 12, maybe more. But they're, again, because they were seen on top tables a lot, their worst matchups being Deathwing, being the main one, and Custodes to some extent, became so much better. Now that Crossfire +1 to wound actually has a good effect versus them, I think it kind of balances out. And
that's exactly what I was about to say.
If they do drop, it's going to be a very small amount.
Yeah, maybe you're probably right. Actually, I was rethinking about the change to Crossfire. Their mining lasers have probably gone from wounding Deathwing on 4s to wounding them on 2s most of the time. Yeah.
Well, mining lasers are strength 9 base, so they're always wounding on 2s. The seismic cannons will need Crossfire, but
yeah. So I
all those
probably right.
mid-tier matchups, the result probably doesn't really change. It's only when we get to the top table matchups where it becomes and as we've said, and it kind of, I think, to my mind, it kind of evens it out and puts them.
I think they'll stay around 57%. They have some matchups where they just dominate. They have some weird matchups that they really struggle with, like people who can just pick up like 40 bodies in a turn and then also have like deep strike denial. But otherwise, most of their matchups are pretty good, and the ones they struggled into, they became easier to play into. So I think they'll probably stay around 57%.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah.
So that's the 2 Tyranid Xenos. So the next one we've got is the second to last new kids on the block, the Leagues of Votann, the Dwarfs, who are sitting at 49%. So they are 1% below average. They didn't get any direct changes in this balanced data slate. Not even any of the secondaries really affected them, because you're probably running a Grimnir most of the time. I don't actually know. I've only played them once at a tournament and I got absolutely annihilated. Go on, Liam.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was going to say, like, I feel like on the whole, I think these guys will stay exactly the same.
I'm same.
Like, we know the biggest change was Deathwing, and they were already really good against Deathwing.
Yeah.
Because their army faction basically ignored their transhuman.
Yep.
Guard, again, like, Mortars never really scared them because they kept Armor of Contempt, or in this case, Void Armor. They kept it. They couldn't re-roll wound rolls from Leontus against them. Like, nothing about them has really screamed like it's going to change. Like, the changes that they've introduced in the balanced data slate, nothing really convinces me that there's been enough to make them change
marginal gains, very marginal gains on things like the Kassakin mortal wounds, for example. But it's marginal.
Yeah, because like one of their biggest weaknesses has always been mortal wounds, and like, don't get me wrong, this isn't an ideal scenario. Against Leagues of Votann, Guard could drop a unit of Kassakin down and go, I'm going to put 6 mortal wounds on your Terminator blob and then both of your land fortresses. I'm going to do that for 2 turns, and now all 3 of those threats are pretty much dead.
Exactly.
Now they just can't do that.
Can't do that anymore.
So I could definitely see once they do reach those top tables, they'll do a lot better. So I think they could. I could see them. I'm going to guess about 51%. I think they'll end out on.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see marginal gains because of like what we just said, but as Liam said, against most things, they're still doing what they did before, and everything's doing to them what they did before. So
so that's Leagues of Votann. The next one is Orks. Dave's Orks.
My boys.
So Orks have had some balanced data slate changes, not in this one, but in the past. Mainly, we all remember the age, or the week. I say age, the week when buggies were like outrageous.
There was that 2 weeks. Which, that didn't last long, and then we've been up, and then we've been down. And I think overall, to be fair, I think Orks have been in a pretty balanced, reasonable place for quite a long time. I just think the problem we've had is there's always 1 or 2 or 3 other armies around us that are just too strong to deal with. The current meta list is always that much stronger that we can't deal with it. You get a few anomalies. I've seen Orks winning tournaments. You get the odd one that it's like, how the hell did he do that? But a lot of that I put down to Orks are one of the swingiest armies in the game. And over the course of 40k, you're going to have a good weekend where you make all your jumps, you make all your charges. And if that happens, Orks are a force. They are an absolute force.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't happen.
I do think especially the way that you run them now with just mass boys and mass infantry, it's terrifying.
I think at the moment that's the way to go because there's so much, a lot of the stuff is elite. You've got your World Eaters, you've got your Terminators, you've got your Plasma, I know you've got your Guard, like Kassakin and stuff would be a problem for my list, but so obviously that's made it better, these changes, but there's a lot of elites out there at the moment who do the -2, -3 damage, deal with these stronger things. I kind of went the other way and just went, right, well, then deal with 120 one wound bodies. Yeah, have 120, because your 3 damage is then gone. All your anti-tank weapons are useless.
Yeah. And it's about the fact that they're toughness 5 means most things are still going to be winning you on 3s, which is a surprisingly big buff.
It is surprising.
Yeah.
It still surprises me now the number of times I go, oh my God, that's a lot of hits. Yeah. Oh, okay. 5 wins. Brilliant. Okay, I can deal with that. I saved 2 of them. You killed 3 boys. That's, great. But in terms of changes from the data slate, I don't, Deathwing, amazing. Like, that was a massive, massive problem for me before as an Orc player because I just couldn't kill anything. I can now kill things again. But overall, do I think it's going to change our place in the meta? Not really. I think we'll still have a few anomaly wins, maybe. I think you can still get to the top tables, but ultimately, Guard, Demons, World Eaters, overall, are going to be consistently stronger.
I think, it's like you said, it's very matchup dependent. Like, some of their matchups are really good, but when it comes to the top tables, it struggles more. And I do think you're right. I do think, Orks do have the potential to really podium, but it all comes down to, do you make those?
But they're a very swingy. They're a very swingy army. They just are. You just took a mech gun. If it maxes out, it can do 36 damage, or it can do a mortal wounds to itself and literally nothing else. And generally speaking, it's the mortals to yourself. So if everything goes off one magical weekend for one lucky Orc guy, I've got no doubt he can win. No doubt. But overall, World Eaters, Demons, Guard,
So I say World Eaters because after our game, we played Orcs. I find, and we both agree, Orcs are very good if someone is running a Lord Invocatus list.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the damage output to chew through like 30 boys in one go. So
Yeah.
I think it depends on what world it is you face.
There are tough matchups, yeah. I mean, and I've said this with Liam during our game. So those of us who don't know, Liam is a much better player than I am. And the game that we had was very close. And I had the feeling that essentially if Liam was also playing my army, the Orks might have nicked the win against the Worldie. It was certainly a close matchup. It wasn't an easy one for you.
There were many times where it could have easily flipped the other way. Like, at no point in the game did I feel, I've got this. Like,
it was tight all the way through. So it wasn't an easy one. But again, that just comes down to the bodies. Again, it's, you're in my thinking with your 3 damage, 8 bound, and your, flat 4 this and that. Okay, fine. Just
wasted potential.
Yeah, exactly. It's all just wasted damage.
Which is, for you World Eaters players, another reason you should run Angron. Because he does.
Yes, because he does mince boys, which is that's partly how your list has developed, right? And since that game, you've tweaked things, tried a couple of other bits, and you've mitigated that problem now. So I'm much more concerned about facing your current Angron list than looking at than the Invocatus.
It's worth noting, like just don't underestimate Orks. Basically, I think that's the main message we want to get.
I think so. I think there's a few armies that are like that though as well, that have that swinginess to them. That when things go off, they can really go off. And overall, I mean, bringing it back to the changes on the data slate, Deathwing great. Kassakin nerfs great. All of that stuff good. But overall, I don't think it's going to change our place in the meta.
Yeah.
I'd still put us at like a B tier army, maybe top B, and every now and again we can spike into a like A tier or win a tournament. But
so that's Orks. The last Xenos race we've got left is Necrons. Now, controversial opinion, I think Necrons are really fucking good.
We all do.
We all do. We all think Necrons are really good, but then we do play with James Marsden all the time.
I can sit there saying
constantly get reminded that Necrons are really good.
Yeah. Sit there playing against James, and I think we can all say pretty confidently, and I don't feel like this is me just bigging us up, James is the best Necron player in the world. I don't really feel like that's up for discussion. Maybe a controversial take. Disagree with me if you want.
He's certainly up there. Like, even if he's not the best, he is absolutely top 5 or even top 3.
I mean, don't start throwing down international challenges here, Joe.
This is what I mean. Show me someone who is better at playing Necrons than James.
Yeah, because he is very good.
Because I know you can't.
Whatever he runs, whatever list he does, he'll still beat me.
You show me a player who goes to pretty much every tournament he goes to and drops maybe 10 points across 5 games, whilst playing Necrons, who are supposedly really bad.
I obviously can't speak for everyone around the world, but I have never met in person a Necron player that's even that's better than him. Like he is by far the best Necron player I've ever.
It's why.
So that does skew our view maybe slightly on this, but we just see the potential, and not even the potential. We see the results week in, week out, tournament after tournament. They're good.
They're really good. I think Necrons are they're one of those factions where you've got your people who are running 27 Scarab bases, 3 Doomstalkers, and then 100 Warriors or whatever. And that's a really bad list, don't get me wrong. But
where are they at? 45%?
Yeah,
I'm surprised they're at 45%. I mean, I really am.
I think the biggest thing people underestimate is reanimation. Reanimation is incredible, and when you play it well, it's basically, I don't know, like 400 points of models you're getting back per game. But
it's not even just that. It's the extra movement you're getting. It's the extra primary you're getting because of it. Yeah. So strong. They're
just an outrageous army. I don't understand how they're on 45%. Again, they're one of those armies that has had a massive series of changes across the balanced data slates. They were the second or joint first codex to come out alongside Space Marines. They were okay when they first came out, but their weaknesses showed straight away. They didn't have much core units, and a lot of their stuff keyed off of core. So then they slowly over time got worse and worse. Then they buffed all their secondaries. Then they made everything core. That was a mistake.
A little bit too much the other way.
Things like the Silent King affecting himself was just probably should never have been a thing. And a lot of those changes are still there, not with the Silent King, but a lot of pretty much everything in the army is still core. Bar I think the Canoptic Doomstalker might be the only unit that isn't core for some reason.
It's It's a vehicle.
No, but I don't think it has it. I'm pretty because it's not just, if you read it there, add the core keywords, the keyword section of the following data sheets, it doesn't include it. So it's like one of the only units that doesn't have it. Pretty sure.
I'm looking this up now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. It's why it's bad.
Yeah, but the main thing is that the vast majority of the army has core.
Yeah.
Like, off the top of my head, the only ones that don't have core are like the characters, and if you're correct, the Canoptic Doomstalker.
Yep. It just means that when you've got the Silent King sitting there handing out rerolls, you've got My Will Be Done for +1s to hit. You've just got an army that their data sheets, when you first look at them, might seem a bit underwhelming. But when you've got all these layered buffs that can literally affect anything in the army, like you're going back to like 7th and 8th edition days of auras affecting pretty much everything, it's just outrageous. They are outrageous.
Yeah. And as well, like, I know back in the previous balance update, mainly Arcs of Omen, people noticed that their secondaries got worse, and people kind of looked at that and were like, oh, they're no longer going to get 45 on their secondaries. They're no longer that good an army. And people forget, like, sure, one of their secondaries got worse. I think they can score slightly less points on it. And they lost Code of Combat, that's it. But it's kind of made up for in the fact that behind enemy lines is so good now. And James plays it really well. He uses the fortification piece to score behind enemy lines. And it just totally makes up for all of their secondaries that got worse. He even uses Engage if he feels that behind enemy lines isn't as good a pick, because he's still going to score like 12 or 13 on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're just a really toolboxy army that has the units to react to whatever the meta changes to. And I feel like that's the flexibility that lets them be really good in the hands of someone who really, really does know what they're doing. And it's the same with reanimations. If you don't position your units well, they will just get wiped out and you'll never get a chance to reanimate. But if they do get a chance to reanimate, you can get like 400 points of free models and move, like a unit of warriors can move like 40 inches in a turn or something silly like that. Like, yeah.
But bringing it back to the data slate changes, I don't actually think they're gonna change much at all, bar the fact that they also will now go better into Deathwing and Kassakin are slightly less of a problem, and you're exactly the same things that we've gone on about. The percentage change? Maybe 1 or 2% against it's basically the matchups against Deathwing.
It's very difficult to say what the percentage will change because, in my opinion, and all of our opinions, as of
not a lot's really
changing. It should be at a 50 or more % win rate, and if they're staying at 45,
then chances are I think they'll stay there.
I think they'll stay there.
Same.
I don't feel they should, but I feel they will.
Yeah.
I mean that pretty much covers out all the factions. I think we've covered everyone. I know we were keen to just kind of do a recap of who we think sits at the top and who we think sits at the bottom.
Well, funnily enough, while we've been talking, I've noticed that we've been saying everyone seems to be going up a couple of %. So overall, basically going to mean everybody is going to stay exactly the same, because we can't all go up 2%, and if we are, well, then it's going to be relatively back where we started, right? So I think the changes are going to come right at the top, and I think, unfortunately, those languishing at the bottom are going to stay languishing at the bottom for now. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, so especially more referring towards the bottom end. I do agree with you in that Deathwatch is going to stay down there, unfortunately.
Sorry, Joe. Sorry, man.
Fine, they'll just stay in the cabinet for another 6 months.
Yeah.
It's fine. They're used to it by now.
This year. You've still got them out plenty, so
Yeah, I do think Tyranids will stay down there as well. Again, unfortunately, I would like to see them. But realistically, the only thing that would have bumped them back up again is like taking back a couple of the point increases.
I think
not take them back all the way.
Points is their biggest issue, not rules.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Knights are always going to be, Knights. They're difficult. They're either up or they're down. I never see them being in the middle.
Yeah, Knights. I feel like because I think both of them.
I think they're doing all right.
48%. I think the other armies that are really going to struggle is Deathguard and Thousand Suns.
Yeah, they'd be the two.
Yeah, I think if I was going to say the three that would sit at the bottom, I would say Deathwatch will still be at the bottom because it didn't really change. I think Thousand Suns will sit second to bottom because, again, they were specifically identified as this army is bad and needs changes, and then just didn't get any. And then I think Deathguard again, didn't really get any buffs, but also didn't really get any nerfs didn't get any positives because they were never really getting to those top tables to run into those armies that received nerfs.
Yeah.
And they were just struggling even against like the mid-tier armies, and that's not really changed. They're still going to struggle.
I mean, seeing Drukhari down there at 44, that's one I'd keep an eye on. That one has got some potential to maybe creep up a chunk, you know, or maybe not. I don't know. I need to see what effect the the core coming back is going to have on that.
But then
that might be one to watch.
On the flip side, the armies that we think are going to be at the top. I mean, if we do it one by one, for me, World Eaters are at the top. There's basically no argument.
I agree.
You're just wrong here, Liam. I'm sorry, but you just are.
No. You're stealing my choice. I was going to say World Eaters.
Yeah. I would say World Eaters at the top. They just play. Don't get me wrong. They only play in one phase of the game, but they play that one phase so well that it doesn't matter.
They're just so strong. Demons, I think, would be fighting it out with them for that top spot. But the thing for me that swings it with demons is there is a bit of luck involved. It comes down to a lot of the saves. And whereas World Eaters, it's just good. It's just consistent. Demons, they have that, but you can have a bad day with your saves, or you can have a very good day with your saves, and it can win or lose a match.
Yeah,
I think World Eaters got more to play with than that.
Especially when it comes to like the mirror match. Not the mirror match. Talking about these two strong armies. If we have a game of World Eaters versus Demons,
which would be a thing. That'll be a thing a lot.
It will be a thing. I think you'll see it a lot, and I think it comes down then to the list when I'm going to say it again, and because you guys are sick of me saying it. Does the World Eaters player have Angron? Because if you don't have Angron, Demons are very, very difficult for World Eaters to deal with, because if they have Be'lakor on the table, nothing can deal with him. Nothing in the World Eaters book that isn't Angron can deal with him. But Angron goes into Be'lakor and goes, hey, I've actually got a reasonable chance at one-shotting you, even with the debuffs that you give me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the... with World Eaters, you can almost consider them two different armies. One is World Eaters with Ordivocars, and one is World Eaters with Angron. Obviously, you can have both of them in the same army, but depending on who you make your... Actually, no, you can't.
Yeah, chances are you're not.
If you have Angron, he has to be your warlord, doesn't he?
If you take Angron, you must...
So you're going to have World Eaters with Angron and World Eaters without. And I think especially so at that tournament where you beat me last weekend, Liam, my game 2 was also against World Eaters, but he didn't have Angron and he didn't have the double Armigers that you're running. It still wasn't an easy game by any stretch, but I won it. But we discussed this after our game. I don't think, bar you rolling terribly and me rolling amazingly, I don't think I can win the game against Angron and double Armigers. I just can't. This is with Deathguard, obviously. So I think there's definitely an argument to be made that World Eaters with Angron, absolutely top tier, like the best armies around. World Eaters without Angron, still definitely top tier, but not top 3.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And I think... sorry, Dave, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just agreeing. Yeah.
I was going to say, we've discussed 2 of the top armies, Chaos Demons and World Eaters. I do think the last of the top 3 will be Guard. I still think they're strong enough.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. There's not below them. I can't see much. There's a gap between them and I think everybody else.
Yeah.
But I don't think they push into that top 2 hard enough. So I mean, I think they're a solid 3rd.
Yeah, their Lehman Russes are still outrageous. You know, they still have the shoot on death strat, which, don't get me wrong, there are times it does nothing, and then there's times for 1 CP you go, hey, I just fought on death, but I could target anything within 36 inches.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
They score amazing.
They've still got Kassakin. You know, they've still got the. You've just got the things that were really, really busted. Are at best now a bit busted. And on top of that, they've still just got a nice solid codex.
No, I agree. They're still really good.
And then who would be 4th? I am trying to think what would be
probably Genestealer Cults
nipping at their heels. Yeah, Gene, they could be up there, but yeah, they got a bit of jank going on, and you don't see. I think the more common one is going to be
Ynnari.
Yeah.
I could even see Ynnari maybe taking over Genestealer Cult. The thing is, they're 2 armies you won't see all that often because there just aren't that many people who play Ynnari.
Exactly. They're the 2 really complicated, really janky.
Yep.
They do really well because half the time you just stand there going, "You're doing what? Why? How did he go there? Okay, fine." You know, you either know them or you don't, and and that really helps helps a lot to get them in there. But
helps to beat your opponent if you know what they can actually do.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we're all pretty much agreed on the top 3 then.
Yeah.
But by all guys, if you don't agree,
chuck it.
I
want to hear everyone.
You later.
I want to hear everyone argue to the death with me that Angron isn't as good.
Liam has found his hill and he is going to die on it.
I am going to die on this hill. I've made my bed. I'm staying in it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that pretty much rounds us out. I think we've gone over every faction. As we said, obviously, for us, next week, we've got the Hertfordshire Spring GT, which is going to be using the new data slate. So I can't wait for everybody to turn up and basically show everything that we've just said is completely wrong, because that's...
probably. But we'll at least have a bit of data to work from then.
But if anybody kind of listens...
We'll hopefully be live streaming it, along with Twisted Dice. Try and get down.
There are still tickets available, so if people are looking for a tournament in the Hertfordshire area, pop along. Really nice venue.
Yeah, I think there's a few left.
Yeah, we'll pop the link in the description so you guys can check it out.
Cool. Otherwise, we'll probably see you all next week. There's more and more news coming out about 10th, so no doubt we'll do a 10th edition talk sometime soon.
We want to hold back a bit until we kind of know. Like, it's all a bit guessy and wish listy at the moment, and we'd rather have a few facts and figures to work with. Before we start talking about it.
But otherwise, I think that's we'll round off for there. It's been really good, guys. If everyone can just
thanks for listening.
Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future.
Thank you very much, guys, for listening.
See you in a bit.